The Democrats' January 6th committee holding their one-sided primetime hearings last night. Members of the committee claimed President Trump had, quote, spurred a mob of domestic enemies, close quote, to attack the Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. For more, let's go to Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram.
Good afternoon. The committee aimed to tie the riot to former President Trump. The panel played new audio and videotape of those close to the president. That included former Attorney General Bill Barr, who said there was no fraud in the election. Wyoming Republican Liz Cheney invoked a painting in the Capitol, which shows President George Washington resigning his military commission. Cheney says former President Trump did all he could to stay in office.
With this noble act, Washington set the indispensable example of the peaceful transfer of power, what President Reagan called nothing less than a miracle. The sacred obligation to defend this peaceful transfer of power has been honored by every American president, except one.
There was dramatic testimony from U.S. Capitol Police Officer Carolyn Edwards. She sustained a traumatic brain injury defending the Capitol.
There were officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they were, they had, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected the picks of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to serve on the committee, so there are two GOP members on the panel okayed by Pelosi. Republicans assert the panel lacks legitimacy.
This is their desperate attempt to try and revive something that has been investigated by the Senate. They didn't have anybody coming in to challenge why the Speaker didn't take appropriate security measures.
The panel wants to show the public that the former president tried to delay certification of the election with the riot. Now, 3 hearings next week, but Washington Democrat Pramila Jayapal doubts the committee will sway the GOP. Back to you.
Chad, thanks. And Republicans are hitting back, tearing into the highly publicized hearings as a circus meant to divert attention away from the Biden administration's numerous problems.
All they're doing is trying to paint a new political narrative that voters need to think about in November because the Democrat agenda has failed.
I think the country sees it for what it is. It's a partisan political committee that the American people are focused on a whole lot of other issues.
Last night's hearing was a primetime dud. Nothing came out of it that we didn't know before, and it didn't change anybody's minds. They want to throw Donald Trump in jail if they can't get that done. They want to prevent his name from appearing on the ballot. It's not about investigating January 6th.
All right, well, I'll start with you. What about the claim that he just made that nothing new was brought out last night, that they said that there would be new evidence, there would be new, information? What new did we learn last night?
Nothing, because it's not an honest pursuit of the truth. I think everyone who is being honest can look at January 6th and say that was a shameful day, in part as a riot ensued at the Capitol. I don't want to steal any talking points. We have conversations offset, and I was having a nice conversation with Sean a little bit earlier about the true nature of this show trial and whether or not it's an honest pursuit of the truth. I want to leave it to Sean, who served in Congress, about exactly how this is set up to be a reality show. But I will say this, if this were an honest pursuit of the truth and you were looking to say what is a threat today to our country, you would talk about the attempted assassination attempt of a Supreme Court justice. You would talk about another target by a group called Ruth Sent Us towards another Supreme Court justice. But the fact that we're focusing on something 17 months ago requires us to ask the question, is this an honest pursuit of the truth?
Well, Dagan, the FBI knew ahead of time that there was going to be a very large protest. They knew ahead of time, but they did nothing in terms of heightened security. They claimed that it was an intelligence failure. And on August 21st, curiously, the FBI, there was a report that, quote, there was scant evidence that the Capitol attack was organized to overturn the election as opposed to just being a protest. So there would have been no problem had there been heightened security.
We've got 5 more of these hearings. Maybe that comes out, maybe it doesn't. It's very clear, given the why now of all of this. It's to maybe prevent the gross shellacking that the Democrats are going to get in November. Maybe it won't be quite as bad. You said reality show. I am a voracious consumer of reality television. And if James Goldston, that ABC News dude who they brought in, he ain't putting last night on his resume. He put Liz Cheney up there for more than half an hour talking over graphics and photos and then just tossing to video. It was intensely boring. And then you always want to have somebody like likable, relatable, who's fierce in a reality show cast. Who do we have on that panel, on that committee? Jamie Raskin. Oof. We want to watch him for 5 more episodes. He wanted to get rid of the Electoral College when Al Gore lost. Or my personal favorite, Adam Schiff. He peddled the collusion theory for so many years and talked about there's more than circumstantial evidence in plain sight of the Russia collusion hoax. I would rather be locked in a porta-john than have to watch Adam Schiff for 5 episodes of anything.
Well, I'll share with you because
I don't know about that. A porta-john?
Even Joe Biden didn't watch last night. So, but Sean, actually, we have sound. Let's take a listen to it.
The insurrection on January 6th, one of the darkest chapters in our nation's history. A brutal assault on our democracy, brutal attack on law enforcement, some losing their lives. And we heard about it last night. We can unite and defend this nation, Democrat and Republican. Allow no one to place a dagger at the throat of our democracy. That's what those hearings are all about. I didn't get to watch them last night because I was doing other business. But I tell you what, there's a lot going on.
Yep, he didn't get to watch them. But former Congressman Sean Duffy, you know, Nancy Pelosi's name has been thrown around a lot, you know, that she didn't approve or she knew ahead of time. And the question that I have is, why wasn't Nancy Pelosi called as a witness? What did she know? When did she know it? We know she's in charge of security. After all, she ultimately brought in the National Guard. She ultimately put in metal detectors, but not for that.
So I'll get to that, answer that question, but I did reality TV. So I met my wife on reality TV. I was on The Real World back on MTV. Please don't pull up clips.
You weren't the likable, relatable
Rachel
guy.
was. I was not. But the bottom line is you can actually edit anything you want and make people to believe what you want in the edit bay. And so here you have Nancy Pelosi who says, I'm going to edit this production and present it to the American people. And by the way, the theory of my case, the theory of January 6th is so weak that I can't allow Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, Republicans, to sit on the committee and actually look for evidence. We can't get the videotape from the Congress. We don't know what involvement law enforcement had. We're not even going to talk about that Donald Trump actually authorized the National Guard to come and protect the very place that he wanted to have an insurrection, allegedly. And so we all know this as lawyers, that we have trials in courtrooms where both sides present evidence. This is a show trial, and we don't have show trials in America where you try to convict people in the court of public opinion. But if we're going to talk about overthrowing an election, why are we talking about Russia collusion, where you had the greatest power centers, the Democrat Party, law enforcement, and the media working together to overthrow Donald Trump? 4 years, wall-to-wall coverage. You had 2 impeachments where they tried to undo the 2016 election. And we're talking about a couple guys from around, not a couple, thousands of people around the country coming into the Capitol. This was child's play compared to the orchestration of Russia collusion. And why aren't we having that hearing?
Okay, so Jessica, we're going to come to you on this. I just want to ask you one question, and that is that the chair, Benny Thompson, says that the job of the January 6th committee is to make sure they put together the evidence and make recommendations to Congress. It's not their job to prosecute. But I thought he was more than disingenuous when he says, I hope the Attorney General's listening. And I hope the Attorney General, you know, if he wants evidence, will be happy to give it to him, especially since a judge says Donald Trump probably committed a crime. And that judge was an Obama-appointed judge who didn't hear all the evidence, who was only there to monitor discovery. You know, it sounds kind of one-sided, but tell me what you think.
Well, I think basically the opposite of what everyone has said so far on this table. I was on air last night with Brett and Martha to discuss this. I thought there was a lot of new information, and everybody actually seems to agree with that, right? And left people are commenting. So first and foremost,
Yeah.
Here are some things that are new. Donald Trump knew that he lost the election. He knew that he lost the election because Bill Barr told him that he lost the election. And if you saw his testimony, it was quite animated. He used the BS word, that he told him enough with this. Ivanka Trump, his daughter, his #1 aide, most trusted ally, she knew he lost the election because she said, I trusted AG Barr on this. Jason Miller, one of his most trusted aides, also testified that he knew that he lost the election. And a campaign lawyer also knew that he lost the election and testified to that. So that's new information. Donald Trump was running around. It is absolutely new. You never saw a video.
No, a video as opposed to reports.
Testimony. But did you know that Ivanka Trump agreed with Bill Barr and not with her father? You knew that about Jason Miller? You knew? Okay.
All right.
Did you know that GOP congressmen asked for pardons because they knew that they were going to be in trouble? Did you know that?
Who are they?
The guy from Pennsylvania, Scott Perry. That's the one name they gave so far. They said there are more. Did you know that President Trump also said that he didn't know if it was such a bad thing if Mike Pence got hanged? That's a pretty big deal. More. So there's a 7-point plan. I thought Liz Cheney did a really good job. I don't know if she's a lawyer or not, but it sounded very lawyerly to me. 7 points.
That was the problem. It was primetime. It was supposed to have some zazz.
This is not meant to entertain you like Desperate Housewives. This is supposed to tell you about something really important in American history.
Why did they hire a TV producer then from ABC News to give it zazz?
Okay. I'm really sorry that you find Benny.
Tell me the 7 points.
That Donald Trump spread lies. We all know that he did that. We saw the footage of him up there at the speech where he's even saying, let's hope Mike Pence comes through for us, spreading lies about the election. He had a corrupt plan to oust the AG. That AG will be testifying next week. Corrupt pressure on Mike Pence. Mike Pence has talked about that directly. Corrupt pressure on state officials. And now we know that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, was in on it. She called 29 individual Arizona officials and asked them to support fake electors to overturn the election results there. There was the false electors plot, which I just talked about. He summoned the mob. You saw him calling him there, and we know what role the Oath Keepers played in this.
He summoned the mob.
Yes, he did. He summoned the mob. He said, come to the ellipse. There's the Stop the Steal rally. I hope Mike Pence comes through for us. And he ignored pleas for help. The Vice President of the United States of America knew that the president would not help him. He was communicating with Nancy Pelosi, with General Milley.
Well, then why didn't Nancy Pelosi allow the National Guard? That's a setup.
This is crazy to me that you think that Nancy Pelosi was the one who was responsible for what happened that day.
Why didn't she allow the National Guard out?
More testimony, I'm sure, from General Milley.
Has she testified?
I don't know.
She has not.
And she won't, by the way. She won't testify.
General Milley testified to speaking. We have to go.
Coming up, President Biden putting the nation in the worst spot in 40 years. The shocking new inflation numbers next.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.